It was one of those nights when the wind felt sharper than it should, carrying an edge of something about to go terribly wrong. I had been on the road for days, working a long haul that had me running equipment checks out of state. My RV was parked back home on my lot, tucked neatly behind my fence with the hitch locked, chained, and registered under my name. I had left it with peace of mind, knowing the locks I used were designed for military transport crates, almost impossible to break without heavy machinery. Still, when I pulled into my street earlier than expected around midnight, I caught the glow of flashing lights and the ugly silhouette of someone standing near my RV like she owned it. And of course, it was Karen. She wasn't just a neighbor. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our subdivision, the HOA enforcer nobody ever voted for, but somehow everyone feared. She had made it her mission to dictate the color of our mailboxes, the types of plants we grew, and even the height of our fences. But what I saw that night went far beyond petty rules and lectures. My RV's hitch was already half unlatched, and Karen was on the phone, her shrill voice echoing through the cold night air as she barked into her phone. Yes. Officer, I need police now. There's an abandoned RV in this lot, and I'm having it towed as a public hazard. My jaw clenched so tight I could feel my teeth grind. She wasn't just lying, she was staging a theft and covering herself with a false 911 call. I killed the headlights and eased my truck silently along the curb, just close enough to see her pacing in her robe and slippers, puffing like she was the law itself. My heart was pounding in fury, but I knew better than to rush out blindly. She was too smooth, too practiced with her manipulation. Instead, I stepped out slowly, letting the sound of my boots on the gravel announce me. Karen froze mid-sentence, her phone clutched to her ear, her wide face caught in the wash of a nearby street lamp. For one priceless second, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't arrogance, it was panic. She stammered into the phone, "Oh, hunt of her mind. Officer." False alarm. But the damage was done. Dispatch had already taken her call, and sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Drawing closer, she tried to bluster. "You shouldn't leave your junk here. It violates HOA code." I cut her off with the title in my voice that made soldiers straighten their backs. "That junk is mine. Karen. Registered. Titled. Insured. And you were about 5 seconds from committing felony theft." Her face turned red, almost purple, as she sputtered. "You can't talk to me like that. I run this neighborhood." Her voice cracked, though, because she knew what I knew. Police were on their way, and her cover story was unraveling. I pulled out my phone, already recording, my flashlight shining directly on the scratched lock she had been fiddling with. Her hands trembled as she tried to hide the crowbar behind her robe. My laugh came out like a growl. "You called 911 to protect yourself, Karen. Good. Because now they'll see exactly what you've been doing." And here came the twist I hadn't planned. My younger sister Emily, who had just flown back from her law internship in D.C., walked out from the house next door where she had been staying with friends. She had seen the entire thing from the upstairs window, and she carried with her a file folder thick with HOA documents and complaints Karen had filed against half the neighborhood. "You're finished, Karen," she said firmly, holding the papers up like a torch. "You've been falsifying reports for years, and I've got every letter, every signature, every forged citation you've ever sent." Karen's jaw dropped, and she looked between me, Emily, and the sirens approaching with a wild desperation, like a cornered animal. By the time the cruisers rolled in, she had lost all that false composure. She flailed her arms, shouting half-truths, but my recording played clear in the night. Her voice on 911 claiming my RV was abandoned. Her crowbar glinting in the flashlight beam. Her own face caught in the act. The officers didn't take long to piece it together. One of them, a veteran himself, looked at me, then at Karen, and said with that dry authority that cuts deeper than a shout, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted theft and misuse of emergency services." Her scream pierced the street, but no one came to her rescue. Porch lights flicked on, doors cracked open, and neighbors who had suffered her tyranny peeked out to watch. Some even cheered softly when the cuffs clicked shut. As Karen was hauled toward the cruiser, she twisted her head and spat words like poison. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But her power was gone. The HOA president she clung to for authority had already resigned months ago under shady circumstances. Her fake rules were built on sand. And now the law itself was dragging her away, her robe flapping like a tattered flag of defeat. Emily slipped her hand into mine, whispering, "It's finally over. People can breathe again." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about an RV. It was about reclaiming dignity from someone who thought fear and lies were stronger than truth and justice. That night, the neighborhood gathered on my lawn. Some brought coffee. Others just stood in silence, soaking in the sight of Karen's cruiser disappearing into the distance. One older man, Mr. Lewis, whose garden Karen had once fined for being too wild, looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Son," he said, "you gave us back our voice." And in that moment, under the hum of streetlights and the fading sirens, I realized the war was never really about property. It was about people's right to live without intimidation. At the police station, Karen's arrogance came roaring back like a cornered beast trying to bluff its way out of a trap. She sat across from the officer in the interview room, her face flushed with rage, her words pouring out in a mix of lies and frantic accusations. I was protecting the neighborhood. That RV was a hazard, a magnet for crime. I was doing my duty as HOA representative. But the evidence was stacked high on the table: my video recording, the 911 call transcript, the crowbar dusted with her fingerprints, and the binder of falsified citations Emily had dragged in. The officer barely had to ask questions. Karen kept incriminating herself, weaving contradictions that even a child could spot. Meanwhile, I stood outside the room, watching through the glass with Emily at my side. She leaned close and whispered, "She's not just guilty of this theft. Look at these letters. Half of them were forged under the president's name after he resigned. She's been running a one-woman fraud operation." My stomach tightened as I flipped through the documents. Fake fees, intimidation threats, citations invented out of thin air, all meant to line her pockets or expand her control. And suddenly, it wasn't just my RV at stake, it was the whole neighborhood, held hostage by her fabricated authority. When the officers returned, they carried the weight of what they had just confirmed. She's being charged not only for attempted theft and misuse of 911, the lead officer told me, but also for forgery, harassment, and fraud. We'll be contacting every homeowner she targeted. Karen was let out in cuffs again, this time without the shrieking. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, as though she finally realized there was no escaping the truth. But the drama didn't end there. 2 days later, the courthouse lobby was packed with neighbors, reporters, and even a county investigator who had been quietly looking into HOA corruption cases across the state. Karen was brought in wearing county jail orange, a stark contrast to the bathrobe queen who had strutted through our streets. When her case was read aloud, the list of charges made the room buzz with disbelief. People gasped when they heard the words fraudulent misrepresentation and unauthorized seizure of private property. Her lawyer tried to spin it, painting Karen as a misunderstood protector of community standards. But then the twist came. A retired HOA treasurer, a quiet man named Douglas, stood up from the gallery. He had been silent for years under Karen's intimidation. But now, with the weight of the community behind him, his voice carried. She threatened my wife with eviction if I spoke up. She stole from the HOA funds, falsified accounts, and bullied residents until they bent to her will. This wasn't about rules, it was about power. His words broke the dam. One by one, neighbors stood up and told their stories. The mother fined for chalk drawings on her driveway. The veteran forced to remove a flag from his porch. The couple harassed over their garden. Each testimony hammered another nail into the coffin of Karen's false empire. Karen snapped under the weight of it. She rose from her chair, screaming at the crowd. "You're all ungrateful. You needed me. Without me, this place would fall apart." Her voice cracked, her hands shaking as the bailiff restrained her. But the crowd wasn't cowed anymore. They stood taller, voices rising, not in anger, but in solidarity. For the first time, Karen's intimidation had no power. She was small, exposed, and utterly defeated. The judge banged the gavel, his voice steady and final. "Order. This court will not tolerate further disruption. Ms. Karen, your behavior tonight has made clear what the evidence already shows. You abused your position. You terrorized your neighbors. And you violated the law. Bail is denied." And just like that, her last shred of control crumbled. Weeks later, the neighborhood transformed. The HOA was disbanded, replaced with a resident council built on transparency and respect. People repainted their mailboxes any color they wanted. Kids drew chalk art on sidewalks. And for the first time in years, laughter carried through the cul-de-sacs. My RV sat proudly in its place, no longer a target of her schemes, but a symbol of freedom reclaimed. Emily, who had exposed the fraud, was invited to speak at a community forum on legal rights. And she told the story with the fire of someone who believed in justice. As for Karen, she faced a sentence that stripped away the arrogance she had built her life upon. Reports said she spent her days in silence. No robe, no crown. Just another inmate learning that power built on fear always collapses when truth arrives. Standing on my porch one evening, I looked around at my neighbors gathering for a barbecue. Mr. Lewis played guitar. Children ran across the lawns. And Emily clinked glasses with a family she'd just met. It struck me then that we hadn't just stopped a theft, we had reclaimed our dignity, our voices, and our unity. Karen's downfall wasn't just about punishing her. It was about freeing ourselves from the shadow of fear she had cast for too long. So here's where I turn to you, the reader. Was Karen ever right to think she had the authority to control everyone else's lives? Or was she just a tyrant in disguise, finally exposed by her own greed? Share what you think, because the line between protecting a community and abusing it is thinner than most people realize. And it's up to all of us to decide which side we stand on.